We are back. Giants Baseball, past, present, and future. The host is Tim Haller. I'm Ralph Tyko. And I'm thrilled. It's been a few weeks. Timmy boy, how are you?
Yes, I'm doing good, Ralph, and it's good to have you back safe and sound within the California border. I know that it was a good trip for you, but it was also a little bit exhausting at the same time. I just got back from a retreat up near Malibu, and when I say that, people go, ooh, how nice. Well, it was a work-related retreat. I can probably imagine 100 different things I'd rather do with a week long with my coworkers. So it isn't by any means a real, it's a working retreat, and it isn't really, a vacation. So I need a vacation from that retreat, but unfortunately, the minute my feet hit the ground here, I was back at it. In this crazy industry that I work in, things just keep on ticking. So it's good to have you back, and yeah.
Timmy, let's elaborate on what you do and the importance of it. Far exceeds, what we're doing right now. We're in the candy store of life. But you work in a very serious part. You work with folks who are addicted and in several different ways sometimes. And you're at the top of the heap. And that how many people, you told me how many people you have under you? 50 some odd?
Well, we employ 48 people, and then we provide beds for about 90 people, including transitional living, detox. We have men's and women's facilities that are separate from each other, and each facility has a number of beds allotted for the actual treatment portion. We have detox beds available to both sexes, and then we have transitional living beds available to those that want to stay in a safe community once they've finished a 60 to 90 day long-term type of treatment. And I work in doing several different capacities, but I'm basically I do the coordination between from treatment to transitional living, and I manage transitional living, but I'm also the spiritual director, spiritual counselor. And just to clarify that, it's a non-religious type of thing. It's really for folks to try to get in touch with something spiritual outside and within themselves, to work through their early stages of treatment and identify with the power or something greater than themselves, whatever that may be, because we see in everything the beauty of God, if we want to, that is, in and around us. It isn't, it isn't the Star of David, and it isn't a cross. It
doesn't have a face to it. It's the spirit.
It's a much more spiritual thing. And there isn't any of that, what I call religiosity, the conformity of rules and being boxed in by really a lot of lies and bull crap, by, what has been part of our culture for couple thousands of years, the religious aspect of things, which I think is really convoluted things a lot, if you will, with mankind in general. So I try to introduce to them different philosophies, different ideas that they can maybe apply to themselves, that gives them some peace and comfort, and it allows them to shed the pain and the difficulties that they've experienced in their life. So that's what I do.
Now, how does your program differ from a 12-step program, or does it intrinsically?
Yeah, it is a 12-step program, and when we introduce to our clients the foundation of 12 steps, but we also do some, very in-depth therapy treatment We do a lot of one-on-ones work. We do work with people that are what we call diagnosed 5150, those that have psychological issues along with their addictions issues as well. We have a fully medicated detox where we help clients get through the physical aspects of their detox. That can be pretty grueling, so we facilitate with medication, et cetera, and that kind of thing. But what we do is really, it's a social model, is what, where people actually interact with each other, they share with each other, they work with each other. We're a facility that's nonprofit, so we really depend on their contributions to have the facility be self-sufficient. They're assigned chores and duties, et cetera, to, keep the ball rolling, if you will. And then we're staffed, by some 45 plus people too. Right.
Yeah, they're not cleaning up after anyone. They're there to help you psychologically as opposed to wait on you.
Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah, and the difference between, say, a facility like the Ranch Recovery Center, the facility I work for, and, say, a Betty Ford Center, it really comes down to the bottom line. The cost for treatment at a 30-day stay at the Betty Ford Center is upwards of $30,000 plus a month for the 30 days. At the Ranch Recovery Centers, we are nonprofits, so we work a lot with county and state entities and agencies. We work a lot with the parole system, parole program. But those that do decide they can come here and they're able to pay for it, it only costs $5,600 for a 30-day stay. So it's obviously a lot less expensive. But then again, you better be able to tie your shoes and instead of people catering to you and feeling like you're entitled, we want to see those be accountable and responsible for their previous behavior and to be accountable and responsible for transforming into their new lives. So, that's our approach.
Do you have, in your group counseling, is it co-ed at all, or are a bunch of men talking with a bunch of men, a bunch of women
It's a bunch of guys talking to a bunch of guys, and on the women's end, it's a bunch of women talking to the women. And we find that over trial and error, basically, that's not a bad situation because a lot of people, and I would say the majority of them, think that they have something to offer the opposite sex or somebody that they would, be attracted to, even at that vulnerable point of coming to an awareness and acceptance of what's going on with them. It's not a healthy environment to be around the opposite sex or romantically involved with somebody while you're new in treatment. It's a distraction. It takes away from what we're trying to, achieve for our clients. So through trial and error over the years, we decided that it's best to keep everything separate. Because let's say a guy and a girl would get... Yes.
I understand where you're coming from. You've been so open with me and on air here in the past. You came to this type of work because of your own recovery. Am I correct?
That is correct, yes. My personal drug of choice is bourbon. I like to drink, and I like to drink a lot. And when I do, I suffer consequences of that behavior. I'm the type of guy that, I'll have one and then I'll have to finish it off with 30 for the rest of the evening. And I'm the kind of guy that would want
just as a chaser.
Yeah, just as a chaser. And, when that happens to somebody like me, I've had a tendency to get confrontational, violent, blacking out, saying things I wish I didn't, getting behind the wheel of a car, putting myself in jeopardy, putting the lives of others in jeopardy. I cannot drink like a gentleman. I can't drink like a gentleman.
Right. I understand that it's a different world for you, and I want to know if there's one person in particular or a few people that you'd like to mention that helped you in your recovery, especially that you'd like to just reach out to and thank.
Well, there are it's a list of folks that have, especially coming from such a blessed and really fortunate background as I have, growing up, the son of Tom Haller and being around that atmosphere, and the closeness of family and friends because of that association through baseball. Right. First and foremost, I would probably have to recognize my best friend and my sponsor, a guy that lives down here in the desert. His name is Garrison Tarno. But I would have to say these individuals have made a big impact on my life as a sober person today. And I can start with Willie Mays, Vida Blue, Bill Lasky, Gary Davenport, Jimmy Davenport, Lenny Gabrielson, Orlando Cepeda, Willie McCovey. All of these people have impacted me before, during, and after my episodes of alcoholic behavior. And Mike Murphy is probably the biggest beaming light out of all of those people, including my father and my mom, and the guys that I grew up with on the peninsula, guys that I played with and or against. But I would have to say Mike Murphy has probably been one of the biggest inspirations and probably the most loving, unconditionally loving man, that I can think of, because he never ever treated me any differently. And that goes for guys like Larry Bear and Mario Alioto. They've always been very good and kind and loving. But Mike Murphy has always been and remains to be a very close person in my life. And I'm really grateful for that, Of course, I've met a lot of people over the years now that I've been in recovery that have been very instrumental in me in really learning how to relive life without any substances, in my case, alcohol. But, I still have this family of baseball, and the people that are in it, they're incredibly loving and unconditionally just wonderful people. So I'm blessed to have them in my life.
As are you. So what I'd like you to do, without mentioning any names, is to, if you would, talk to some success that you've had that has been incredibly satisfying to you, that has made, you can't just, if you could pick out one or two things that can, basically a microcosm of the success that you've had. If you could pick out one or two people or a component.
I'll start, from probably a minimalistic side, sure, and then I'll conclude it with a major impact in my life. What my life is like today in recovery because I decided to get sober. First, I wouldn't be able to do a radio show and a podcast show with a dear man that I consider a dear friend of mine now because of our relationship, Ralph Tyko, and be able to do a show like this and to be able to talk about things that are so, trivial at times, but still so very important and a big part of my life, and that is baseball, and especially Giants baseball, Bay Area baseball. So just to have that opportunity, you wouldn't have wanted to do a show with me had you known me before when I was drinking.
Okay.
And then what it's allowed me to do over a period of time, obviously, is to pursue something I would have never guessed I would be involved in, and that is to actually work in the recovery field, but then allow me to get educated to do things and do what I do from a spiritual standpoint. My life today is so much different and so much simpler because of the choices that I've made now that I'm sober. In other words, my life today is, my credo is to love and serve. Love God, serve people, be available to them, because I go without, there's nothing that I go without. Everything is provided for me. I don't have any needs. As far as, I used to need the Corvette. Well, I don't need that Corvette anymore. I used to need the 6 hot chicks. I don't need 6 hot chicks. I used to need to have the tailored suits and the $1,000 Italian ties. Don't need those things anymore. Everything is provided for me in a much simpler and better way, because that was ridiculous thinking on my part. So what my life is like today is that I'm still very blessed financially. I've got so many wonderful gifts because of the precursor of having been able to play baseball and own a company after that. But now to be involved in this business, I'm fulfilled emotionally and spiritually for myself, in a selfish way, in a good selfish way, for self-care, so that I can be available to people that are experiencing the same thing that I did.
Well, you mentioned something. You have to be good you have to keep your cup filled before you can fill others. And that, hearing it the way you put it, really makes me feel good. Some people call that hedonism, keeping your cup filled and getting what you want. But
well, there's a difference between being selfish and taking good care of yourself. And we, in our culture, we get caught up with possessions monetarily. We get caught up in the almighty dollar when we can't sit back and just enjoy, and be grateful for the simple things that we have.
Yeah, keeping up with the Joneses, because you always want something that somebody else has, as opposed to appreciating what you have yourself and thanking God. However you want to thank God. I said that just off the top of my head, but it's amazing how we all gravitate to that. With me, it's the God that I think is within me.
Right, and He is there, and and that's really the validity, the truth, the bottom line, the core to God. We are a creation of His. He is within us. And once we untap some of that inner resource, it makes us forget a lot about, those selfish desires that we have. And just how we want to treat others and speak to other people, and to be a good listener. And it's not always about me, because somewhere somebody's hurting. There's some pain going on, whether it's they've lost a loved one, or they just lost a job that meant a lot to them, or they've been, or memories can regenerate a lot of pain, or guilt and shame, or anything of that sort. Everybody is always going through something. And there was a time in my life where I could care less about anybody else, because it was all about me. And I was distorted in that thinking. Once I was able to get out of myself and be available to others, that's really when the blessings started to just, explode for me.
The profession you chose, combined with your your choices in terms of abuse, self-abuse, and what have you. It must be very difficult because baseball is a drinking sport. I mean, the executives drink. You celebrate with a beer after the game. Is it institutional? Is there a much higher preponderance of abuse amongst professional athletes, not just baseball, all sports? I'm wondering.
Well, I really think, honestly, and this is just, I think that there are some validity and some proof of this. I think alcoholism or the addiction gene it's genetic. We have it in us, and whether it's an obsessive compulsive thing to want to eat a gallon of ice cream every night, or go to the 24-hour adult bookstore every day, or to go to the casino, or to consume a case of beer, whatever that is. I think all of us have the potential to do that. Now, I think there are some other things that may trigger that, or to that may allow it to sort of manifest those behaviors. But I know in my case specifically, because I lived it, I was a guy at a young age, like in high school, that really didn't drink much. I didn't drink at all. I smoked a lot of marijuana, and I still don't have any. I can't do it for myself. But I mean, I think marijuana, out of all the different substances you can use, is probably the least. I don't think that there's a lot of negativity to it unless it leads you to something else. I know a lot of pot users start to use heroin, so that's not a good idea. But my point being, growing up, I didn't drink a lot, and it wasn't until I started playing in the minor leagues that we sat in the back of the bus and started to consume huge amounts of beer and liquor. And I still had a threshold. I still subconsciously allowed myself not to get to a point where it was going to affect me, the next day professionally. That was there were some times when I did play hungover, or I wasn't feeling as light on my feet as I should have, but I sort of ignored that. But it wasn't until I got hurt that for me, it was like falling off a cliff. It was just like falling over the edge of a 1,000-foot drop. The minute I got hurt, well, not the minute, but a few months later, after being injured, the symptoms of alcoholism really started to manifest themselves. And I also believe
responsibility to help transition a player, whether he's hurt or not, out of an artificial environment of grandeur, it must be, that in itself must be a hell of a transition without the abuse. Is it baseball job? Is it a big industry? Should they be on top of this and see which players are struggling and keep up?
Well, I certainly can say this. I think that they have the money to be able to afford to allow for services for veterans, guys that have played, et cetera. I know that in the players' agreement, if the guys are still playing, if there's an addiction issue, that's addressed and they go to treatment. Ultimately, though, it really boils down to that individual. It really boils down to the person, the one person who has the problem, and whether or not they're willing to confront those issues head on. It takes a lot of courage. Because I'm a statistic where, about 8 out of 10 people that are afflicted with this disease will have ultimately died directly or indirectly because of it, whether it's from an overdose or a car crash because they were intoxicated. or end up in prison and get killed there, or live the rest of their lives in prison because of something that they were doing while they were not in their right mind. And just to kind of, I guess, underscore that whole thing, the alcohol or the drugs are only a symptom of the problem. The problem is psychological. It is within ourselves. It's the way we perceive life, perceive people in our lives, and the way we perceive ourselves. And it isn't very realistic. There's some delusion there. And it is, to a degree, a mental illness. Addiction is a mental illness. And then we become absorbed in it. So the alcohol is just a symptom of the problem. The problem was Tim. And I needed to learn how to change my thinking, change my perception of things, and change my life. Otherwise, I wouldn't be on the phone doing this radio show.
But you had a wonderful, if you will, of a wonderful friend and who happened to be your sponsor as well. Not everyone is exposed to that. If you hadn't been exposed to that, could have been a different outcome. And I wanted to hit on one other thing. I read and this is somewhat off the subject, but it brings us back. I read a terrible meme on Facebook or somewhere down the line that there's a direct correlation between somebody recovering from cancer and the amount of insurance they have. Now, is this not symptomatic of people who are addicted? Sometimes the amount of insurance can afford them Betty Ford, or it can afford them something that they don't even know about, like your program, a nonprofit program. The advertising that Betty Ford
we're dealing with different demographics too. Betty Ford's going to cater more to the entertainer, the person that can afford that, or somebody that works for a corporation that has an insurance policy that can pay for it. And our demographic is much more for I would say, the less fortunate. Some are indigent, some are homeless, some are getting kicked out of county jail, some are getting kicked out of prison. And then there are just some that just can't afford a Betty Ford, but they still have a decent life or a decent career, but they're bogged down by this disease. And, we're an option for those people. We're an option for those, yes.
Can you give an email how to reach your program for anybody out there who might be suffering?
They can contact me directly two different ways, Ralph, and this is the way I operate. They can contact me. My email is thaller, Haller, @consultant.com, or they can reach me at area code 760-777-5080. And either one of those ways, you can call or email me and communicate something with me regarding themselves or a family member that they're trying to get some help for. And I'm all ears, and we're available to them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And those are my direct emails and my direct mobile line. And I have no problem getting those out, because the response that you're going to get from me personally is a little bit better than even when you call a facility like ours, we're 24/7, 365. I'm going to be able to respond in a more timely and effective manner. And I'm here for those people. Now, I want to make these folks fully aware, if you are looking for these services, that eventually or ultimately we're going to have to speak to the person directly, so we can do a proper screening to make sure that our facility is going to be a good match for them. Because there are certain cases that we can't work with, and those are the severely impaired, being physically handicapped, or have medical conditions that we aren't going to be able to provide proper medical care for, but I can refer them to a facility that can. And also, a lot of it just depends upon their willingness. And we're going to need to talk to that individual and see where they are psychologically, if they're ready to get help. Because at the end of the day, they have to want to get change. They want to have the different life. It isn't for their wife or their girlfriend or their boyfriend or their mother or father or their Aunt Gertrude. They're going to want to get well for themselves. And it'll never work if they want to get sober or clean for somebody else or something else. Because unless you're committed to wanting to change, nothing will ever change. And it'll always remain that way. So I want to make that perfectly clear, because you're talking about walking over a threshold, because for years we've lived in a lifestyle that has become so customary, and we're used to it. All of a sudden, that no longer is going to exist, and we have to rediscover ourselves emotionally, spiritually, physically, without the use of anything, like drugs or alcohol. And it's a big change for a lot of people.
Right. Is there meditation involved, group meditation,
and that's part of kind of what I do on my end, on the spiritual side. I introduce them to meditation. I teach them just very fundamental, basic things like breathing techniques, quiet periods, going to a special place. We often utilize music, meditation music for background, but trying to calm down or quiet down that motor, which is between our ears, because a lot of us experience anxiety. And it's something that needs to be addressed. We need to slow the mechanism a little bit, because we're a little bit out there already. And we're extremely intelligent people. We're extremely loving and caring people. But at the same time, we're very self-absorbed and wanting to maintain a state of mind that has become very unhealthy for us. And that a lot of times it gets us into a lot of trouble, the consequences of those things. I hear it on a daily basis. I drank and I broke out in silver, bracelets. A lot of guys get arrested. A lot of women get arrested. Something may happen in the heat of the moment, or the heat of rage, and it's something that they'll regret.
Broke out.
So, these are all the sort of the consequences that come from that type of behavior.
That will last the memory of just those words. I broke out in silver bracelets.
Are you still there?
Yes.
Ralph?
Are you listening? Yes, Timmy.
Hello.
Hello, Timmy.
Hello.
Timmy. I hear you. Timmy.
Ralph?
I lost Timmy. Is this better? Timmy.
Ralph?
Okay, Timmy. Can you hear me? We crapped out. Let's hang up and end the show. And I hope it's still going on my end. I'm going to push the button to end it. Are you with me, Timmy? Timmy?
Can you hear me?
I can
Ralph.
now. I could before. Are you still there?
I'm here now.
You were here all the time? You couldn't hear me?
No, I couldn't.
But now we can, and I just want to...
Hey, we need to get the producer into recovery.
No, we need to get...
I'm just being silly.
Is there a recovery for just a little bit? And why would I want to recover from this?
I know. There's nothing to recover from. What are you talking about?
Are you kidding
Hey, we're
me?
perfectly fine.
Really to recover to? I have to take a nap. The music sounds better. The food is
oh, goodness.
I'm on my way to recovery right now. Here I go. But, Timmy, I don't even want to talk baseball. I just want to tell you, this was the most important show you and I have done. And,
well, I don't blame you for not wanting to talk baseball. And I'll be frank with you. I loved doing what we do. I look forward to it on a weekly basis. My Saturday nights are quiet, so it allows me to get on the phone and we'll be able to do this electronically and digitally, and I'm grateful for that.
I didn't mean I don't want to talk baseball. I just meant that there's nothing we can say other than the Mets and the Giants may come down to that last final moment. My Mets, your Giants, my Giants too, because I just got back from a pilgrimage to the Polo Grounds, the old Polo site in New York, and I got to share that with two dear friends, Mark Weiss and Ronald Harvin, and it was just tremendous. There's a plaque where home plate used to be, right in the apartment complex that they built where the old gal used to sit. And there's a staircase that was recently reconstructed, brush staircase, named after the first owner of the Giants. And we got to walk on that plaque, walking up took pictures of it all, sat there, did a show on the old New York Giants. And
I was fortunate enough to listen to that. And it was fantastic.
Enjoyed it all?
Sure.
Oh,
of course I did.
I thought you might. I mentioned on that show, and it's definitely worth mentioning, that my dear friend Peter Golenbach, who I do a show with on a weekly basis, as well as you, wrote a book on, not specifically on baseball, but he wrote a book on Brooklyn, the borough of Brooklyn in New York City. And a bunch of people came out of there that non-sports related that he wrote about. The president of the borough, Neil Sedaka, a whole bunch of people, and one of them was Monty Irvin. And I asked him on the show, why did you pick Monty Irvin, who had apparently, or what I thought to me was no real ties to Brooklyn. He was a Giant, New York Giant. He mentored Willie Mays. He Hall of Famer in his own right. He came into the game well past his prime and put some great numbers up. A wonderful, the class, the Stan Musial of our franchise in a lot of ways was Monty Irvin. And Peter told me a story, and it's in his book, that when Branch Rickey was looking for the first Afro-American, black, at that time colored ball player to play in the majors, first person he thought of wasn't Jackie Robinson. He came to Monty Irvin. And Monty had been, because of his upbringing and his experiences, unable to guarantee to Mr. Rickey. He didn't even want to guarantee to Mr. Rickey. He didn't want to take it on in the first place. He couldn't guarantee he wasn't going to turn the other cheek from everything he'd taken. Incredible amount of damage to the Afro-American of Monty and Jackie Robinson's time, but also to the time of the folks who crossed the line well into the 60s and beyond. And, the Jim Rice, which is even after the 60s, it's horrible. And there's some teams that are accepting and some aren't. Proud to say, from the idea of being a New York Giant fan and now San Francisco, because I've lived here most of my life, I got to see Willie only saw him miss about 3 or 4 years because I came out here in 65. Well, actually, it's more. They left in 57, don't remind me. But so I'm a Giant apologist all the way. This is going to be very tough for the Giants against the Mets. And it was Monty. There was Monty, the great giant, who I remembered last week when I did this pilgrimage show. I wanted to mention it again. He's just very proud of Monty Irvin. Did you get to meet him at all?
When I was very young, yes, I did. I was fortunate enough to have met him. And of course, Dad loved him, and they were good friends. He's just a super person, a super man, wonderful person. Just so loving and giving, and it's just a whole different era, Ralph. We're talking about guys, men that play the game that we all fantasized about playing growing up. Any young boy always wanted to be a major league player. These guys were real. Today's day and age, they're real, but things have gotten a little bit askew with the money they're making and the exorbitance of fame and media attention that they get. They seem almost untouchable and not really real all the time. But they are good guys. It's just that it's a completely different culture today. But a guy like Monty Irvin, would give him a shirt off his back for you.
Yeah, there are some that transcend the generation, that remain down to earth and humble, and the money that they make doesn't change them at all. Why don't you name a few of those for me?
A few of the guys in today's game that I think are quite a little bit less impressionable, if you will, that come to mind, guys that really to me stand out. We'll start from the East Coast and we'll work our way west.
Okay.
The first guy that comes to mind is the center fielder for the Baltimore Orioles, Adam Jones.
Oh, Adam Jones.
I think he is a great humanist. He's a wonderful person. He doesn't call a lot of attention to himself. He goes out and he plays very quietly. He plays, which could ultimately translate into a Hall of Fame career. He's number one.
Right.
Number two, a guy that I think is quite overlooked when they talk about second baseman in the American League, and he's a kid that grew up over in the East Bay. Dustin Pedroia, the second baseman for the Boston Red Sox. I think he's another guy that plays the game very hard. He's very dedicated to his sport and his team. So those two guys right there. I think that the Giants have about 3 or 4 guys that exemplify that sort of humanistic approach. They don't act as though they're better than or above anybody else. And I'll throw a couple of names out. Buster Posey, Brandon Crawford. I'm going to throw Matt Duffy out there because he's, in my heart, still a Giant. Joe Panic, Hunter Pence, Brandon Bell. Those guys are, entrenched in some really good, they just have good qualities about themselves. They haven't allowed their profession to consume them or to make them feel like they're better than everybody else.
From what I understand, Pat Burrell is among those guys. He's not a current Giant, but Pat the Bat. Am I right about that? I've had the opportunity to meet Pat, and I don't really know him, but I know that a lot of people say the same thing about him. But I don't know firsthand. I don't know, absolutely, that he's that way. But from what I've heard. But those other guys that you testify to, that's firsthand knowledge of these guys.
Yes, it is.
So
yes, it is.
It's not just a rumor or anything. That's nice to know.
No.
It makes it, just you saying that, I'm a 70-year-old baseball Meshuggah, crazy man when it comes to baseball. So it's tough to be, and I've been in the baseball business with Topps, it's tough to develop rooting interests for a grizzled old guy who sees guys busted for this, that, and the other thing. But just you saying that makes me want to root for those guys.
And you know what? If you have an opportunity and you expose yourself a little bit, you're going to really kind of see what I'm saying about some of these people, or like a guy like Adam Jones or a guy like Dustin Pedroia. They don't call the attention to themselves. It's about team, and very quietly they put up some significant statistics. They aren't in the headlines every day. And I mean, not just for what they do on the field, but they haven't been convicted of beating their wives. They haven't been convicted for a DUI. They haven't been thrown into the names of scandalous guys that are involved in PEDs. They're just good baseball players that love and respect the game of baseball, and they love the organizations they represent and play for. Those are the guys. I think there's another kid, Jose Altuve. I think he's really turning into one of these very special players.
Best hitters, and he could be one of the best hitters of our decade. This guy, every year.
Absolutely. And he does not have that air about him of, hey, I'm the greatest guy that ever played the game, and don't you know who I am, and always drawing that attention. He's a big component to that Houston Astro Club. And because of he being so exceptionally talented and so good, he gets a lot of publicity, but he sort of shies away from that. He's not into that, showmanship stuff. And I really admire that about guys,
Do the guys like Pedroia, who's obviously an overachiever, are they easier to find amongst that group of people that we're talking about than a guy like Adam Jones, who seems to be a natural, seemed to coming up, he was this number one guy. Pedroia was a guy, 5'9", is this guy going to make it? He had to prove it every year. Is there a correlation, or do you see a lot fewer of those naturals who were looked at in junior high school or even grammar school sometime and catered to going on these teams and what have you? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. Just for the sake of just ability or athletic prowess, you look at anybody could have said, oh, Adam Jones is a can't-miss candidate, to be a really good major league center fielder. Look at him. I mean, just look at, he's 6'3", 220. He runs like a gazelle. He runs everything down in the outfield. He's got a great arm, and he hits 25, 30 home runs a year.
And scouts would call, old-time scouts would call, he's got a baseball face. He's one of those guys that
you can't miss. And then you look at a guy like Dustin Pedroia, who is, 5'8", maybe 160 pounds soaking wet, but his teeth are dirty from diving into the dirt. His mouth has been open when he went for that ground ball and he got a mouthful of dirt. You would never assume, he's so unassuming, he doesn't project that. And that's an extremely admirable quality because Dustin Pedroia has made himself into a great second baseman.
Right.
And
yeah, you know why it's admirable? Because no matter who you are, a natural, a superstar, whatever, you're going to have to come down and meet the real people in a transition that you just have no preparation for. And that's what I'm saying. Baseball needs to be taking care of their own because they are, given the circumstances, psychologically vulnerable, as we all are. And yes, we need to take self-responsibility and all of that. But, it's not always that
well, I think as an industry that baseball has a duty to, and I know that I did this with both the Orioles and the White Sox organizations, in spring training or whatever, we'd all have meetings for a week or so starting out in camp about how we were supposed to behave. and the things to do and things not to do. And ultimately, it would come down to the individual and the decisions that they would make. But we're not just talking about, representing a team or an organization. We're talking about how a person is supposed to conduct themselves in life. And, a lot of these kids, guys that play baseball, they don't have the tutelage of coaches and professors when they go to college, like college basketball or football players have, to be around that mentorship. Some of these kids are coming straight out of high school, or they're coming straight over from Puerto Rico or the Dominican Republic, and they have no idea what it is to behave in a manner that's respectful. And it's important for the organization individually to try to put these guys on the right path, one. But I think as a whole, if a guy has an opportunity to progress and succeed in baseball, that Major League Baseball has a responsibility to these guys in the event that one of them may, have a drug issue or a drinking problem. Or an anger management issue, or a gambling problem, to be able to facilitate, and then they have to either decide themselves individually whether or not they want help or not. I think that we've seen examples and good cases throughout the years of guys that have a dependency on something, and some of them embraced it, and some of them died from it. There were, case in point, Steve Howe, great left-handed pitcher in the Dodgers organization. He was finally clean from his addiction, but he died in a car crash not too far from where I live today, speeding 110 miles an hour. Let me think of somebody else that, their demise.
Played with, who did recover, and went on to be a player agent, a successful general manager, and was able to transform his life. And these were teammates, both struggling with the same addiction. So it can be, you don't necessarily not have to. That 20% can be 30% eventually, and 40%. Doesn't, and that's what one could be a member of the 20% if they choose.
Right. I mean, I can look at guys like, Darryl Strawberry now. He's turned his life over completely to a new way of living and a different walk of life. But he struggled for years with his addiction, and then his own teammate, Doc Gooden, is, at the end of his rope. He, there's no hope left for a guy like that. But I think of guys like Bob Welsh, who was a great pitcher with the Dodgers and the Oakland A's. He overcame his addiction for alcohol. And then I look at a guy like Eric Shaw, who eventually and sadly took his life because of the demons that he battled. I mean, I could go on. There's a list of guys like Ron Bryant and Rod Beck. These guys had their demons, and for whatever reason, the demons won. And I think that there is a certain accountability, if you will, from Major League Baseball to take care of these fellows. They have an incredible union. They take care of them very well financially, even after they're done playing, through their pensions, etc.
Right.
But if a guy's having problems with something, Major League Baseball should have a component.
Making bad decisions, you could go through that money. You're apt to make bad decisions if you're abusing drugs and alcohol.
Absolutely.
Which are expensive in themselves, but then you make bad decisions, so you go through that money like Grant went through Richmond sometimes. It's
exactly.
Just and if you're not saving money when you're making $10 an hour delivering for the grocery store, you're not going to be saving money when you're making $100 an hour playing baseball.
No.
these are habits that people have that that money, you can't throw money at it. Let's put it that way.
Well, they're the compulsions. They're compulsions to, some people just can't manage their checkbook. Some people can't, pay their rent at the first of the month because everything's been spent. And baseball, I think, has a responsibility first with the individual organizations, and then later on to facilitate some of these people that have those tendencies. The vast majority of them don't, and they're doing just fine. But there are some cases where, these guys just don't have a really good concept of all of those things. It can be overwhelming for many of them, and they make bad decisions and bad choices, They don't make mistakes. A mistake is something we made in third grade on our math test. We're making conscious decisions, and we're not making the best of the decisions,
Well, it isn't always easy making good decisions. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, it isn't, especially if you're around other people that have the same tendencies. If you choose to call them your friends, or and they're doing the same, their behavior is identical to that. You don't know any different. You don't know the difference.
Timmy, did you ever get a chance to meet Don Newcomb, who is doing this kind of work, it seems, way back?
On several occasions, and of course, only because of my father and his association with the Dodgers, and then Don's association with the Dodgers. What a beautiful man. What a beautiful person. And then what he does now and has for such a long time. Oh, what I remember about him, man, his hands were as big as my father's. They were the size of, good grief, grizzly bear hands. But the kindest, most gentlest smile.
As big as Willie Mays' hands?
They were bigger. My father had hands were I can't even describe them to you because it's obnoxiously, like, you'd think I was exaggerating. My father's hands were so big, people would tell me to this day, I remember shaking your dad's hand and his fingers went up to my elbow. and I just would get a big old kick out of that. He had some paws now, big, huge. He made Willie's hands look small.
Wow.
That's just the kind of hands my dad had.
The Niners named Merton Hanks, who had big hands big like that. I remember shaking hands.
He had a long neck, too.
Yes, he did. Yeah, you have a good memory for that. Yeah.
Merton would wear those turtlenecks or whatever you'd call them, or those faux turtlenecks underneath his jersey.
I think he was 45, or if I'm not mistaken, but he was a nickelback, and he'd come in. And, he was terrific.
He was great.
Yeah. You're a Bay Area guy, Timmy. I love this show.
I love it too, Ralph. I don't know at this stage of my life what I would do without without you and I chatting every Saturday evening. And I'll tell you, I really missed you the last couple of weeks, but I know what a special and timeless treat it was for you to go back there, go to your old neighborhood, trudge along those old grounds of the polo grounds, and just to meet up with old friends and et cetera. What a great experience.
Well, listen, I grew up in a neighborhood where I aspired to mediocrity. So I was a very middle-class Jewish neighborhood in Queens that has turned totally different, more eclectic, different and better and worse and strange. The whole city has changed so much since I grew up there that going back and taking Tally and having her see the schools that I grew up attending or not attending, and meeting some of the people at the neighborhood reunion to get a taste of my roots, and to see New York City. I mean, let me tell you something. I did some things that I never did growing up. I went around on the boat in the Circle Line and took pictures of New York from an angle that I'd never even seen. I did some stuff that I did as a kid, Central Park. We went to the Metropolitan Natural Museum, so got to see dinosaurs, all kinds of different things. It was terrific, and it was priceless yet exhausting. I'm not a flyer. Next time I might, after all these years. So we took Amtrak, and with that comes 3 days of you go. It's like purgatory. You go from one moment of hell to the great. The regions are scenic. You take pictures of things like going through the Rockies and the Sierras, and it's wonderful. On the other hand, you spend 3 days on a train. It is what it is. So next time it's going to be a shorter trip. I'd love to go up to the beaches on the Oregon coast. I've been up Highway 5 1,000 times, all the way up to Washington. Not 1,000, but 13 years in a row, doing the California League and the Northwest League for tops in the summer. But I never got to go to the coast. And Tally has been there, and she's going to take me there next vacation. And now I have to go back to my own vacation. We're on vacation from vacation.
From the vacation, yes.
Right, and life is. I honestly have always tried to remember that you don't have to live to work. You could work to live, and makes a big difference sometimes. Once you get those priorities straight, that time is more important than money. You can't buy time. And I also know that there's an intrinsic divide between labor and management, where labor is always thinking, I mean, whatever I make exchanging time isn't worth it, and management is always thinking, whatever I pay someone is too much. And that becomes a mindset that has divided this country irreparably, I think. But there are a lot of things dividing dear old United States of America at this time. I wouldn't know who to vote for if I had to do it tomorrow. I mean, of course you say...
Yeah, I don't either, and you know what? I feel ashamed because of that. I feel ashamed, not for myself, but for the people of this country and the representation that we're getting.
I mean, it's unbelievable how in any other society, if Debbie Wasserman Schultz resigned, the head of the Democratic Party resigned, they would have said, let's have a mulligan and do the primaries over. They didn't do that. They think they're so impressed with themselves that they can say, we were caught, but you know what? Yeah.
You know, there's something missing from our culture today, Ralph, and that is just a sense of humility. Raising your hand and saying, you know what, I made a mistake, I admit it, I would like a chance to do it again or do better the next time. We don't have that in our DNA anymore. They sweep stuff underneath the rug, they ignore it, they point the finger at the other person because of their misdeeds. There's no more of this accountability saying, you know what, I screwed this up. I'd like a mulligan. I'd like a do-over. I admit it. It was my bad judgment. Whatever the scenario, we don't have that anymore. We have to cover it up, or we have to ignore it, or lie about it, or blame the other person for it. There's no personal accountability anymore, and that's a huge problem in our society today.
It
truly is.
In every political speech where Trump will say, all he'll talk about is Hillary's shortcomings rather than the specifics of how he intends to change things. And then if you listen to Hillary talk, she's talking about scaring people because Trump is what he is and his shortcomings rather than what she's going to do any differently than what she's been doing. I think we're messed and feathered. And
well, we are.
That's the nicest way I could explain it, because I have a gentleman with me on the line. That otherwise I tell it more like it is. We are definitely screwed up, and I'm glad
I'm on the short end now, because I don't want to be here in another 25 or 30 years. I really don't. I'm afraid to see what's going to happen. And I don't want to be around for it. I'm grateful I've lived the life I've had. But it's gotten to a place now where I prefer not being around. And that's pretty selfish. But that's just the way I feel. Because it isn't ever going to be anything like it was.
Timmy, you can't think that way, because you have so many people yet to help. And you got to keep doing this with me, because I'd be nowhere without you on Saturday nights.
Oh, man.
But I look forward to doing this for another 10, 15 years, my man.
Okay, I want to give you a little buzz. Next Saturday, we will have the great Hobie Landreth joining us.
Oh, my God. He's the catcher.
So,
that Casey
the catcher
said,
that Casey...
You got to have again. Wow.
You got to have a backstop. So we're going to have the good fortune of having Hobie on with us next week.
And Patrick, we got to get Patrick on.
I don't know, but the following week, John D'Acquisto is going to join our show. You've had him on before on other comfortably zoned programs. And then week 3, the third week out, we're looking at John the Count Montefusco.
Whoa.
Will join our airwaves.
From New Jersey.
Yeah, so, right. And then I will be on assignment, Ralph, on the Saturday, October 27th. I'm going to be doing a service for a loved one up in the Portland area on October 22nd. And then the following week, I'm going to try my best to reconnect with Greg Moonman Minton. And then just hopefully after the World Series is over, I can get my old dear friend to call in from St. Louis, Missouri, who will always be a Giant, but was really infamous as a Cardinal, Jack the Ripper Clark. So we've got a few guys that we're banking on to be a part of the show. And then, of course, we're going to get Patrick back on.
If I could get to talk to you, and no one ever calls me. We never get a guest.
It's still a great show.
Jew boy. And, it's not easy to please Jew boys, because when we just look at things, I'm pleased by this. And
while you were gone in New York, I was trying to make a little bit of headway in trying to spice up the show a little bit and try to get some of these old-timers on and to enjoy a little bit of their input on life today and what's going on in their worlds. John D'Acquisto just put out a book that is climbing
I've read excerpts from it that he's published.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic.
He is naturally funny. He's probably the funniest guy in baseball. And he is so self-deprecating and so human. His writings remind me of your talking. And it's wonderful. He did a book signing, and while we were on the train coming back up at the Giants store, pictures on his website. If you go to John D'Acquisto, he'll befriend you if he doesn't already have the maximum amount of friends as some folks do. And he's just a terrific guy. He's not only does he write, not only did he pitch 100 miles an hour, the man is an artist.
He's an accomplished artist. He's an incredible painter and in the mediums he uses, he's incredibly talented. And I'm looking forward to having him on the show. We were able to talk for a good while a little over a week ago. He called me, and that's just the kind of man he is. That's just the type of fellow he is. So I'm grateful that he will be joining us in the next couple of weeks as well. And And I know Hobie Landreth is going to be a big deal for you because of his connection with New York and Casey and the Mets and your heartbreaking.
And with the Giants. Hobie.
And with the Giants, absolutely.
He was decent defensively at a time when they didn't really need great offense from the
But he was an incredible catcher and small of stature, and he and Dad were best of friends. And Hobie and his son David and my dad and I, in the off season, we'd all go hunting over into the valley over by Crow's Landing and Firebaugh. We'd go duck hunting and dove hunting and pheasant hunting, and we would spend days together, just the four of us. And we've found, forged this lifelong friendship and relationship, and it's because of my dad and Hobie's relationship going through the minor leagues in the Giants organization.
No one that everybody you talk about was your dad's best friend. Everybody loved your dad, and your dad loved everybody. And you mentioned cultures and the difficulty that Latin cultures have in adjusting. And that's in today's day and age where there are academies and this, that, and the other thing. In your dad's day and age and in the days of the Giants coming up, they were able to mix the three cultures of the white guy, the Afro-American,
the black guy,
and the black,
and the Latin.
And the Latin.
And you know why? Because they were all human beings.
Latin cultures had differences too. If you're a light-skinned Latin, that meant one thing. If you're a dark-skinned Latin, that meant another thing. Does that show you in itself how crazy this world is?
Well, it is, because those guys embraced each other. They really did. They looked past color of skin. They looked past language, because they had a brotherhood, a kinship amongst each other, way beyond anything stereotypical, and they became brothers. They became family, and that is really kind of underscores what I try to say every day. The humanistic side of our culture today is so askew than what it was 40, 50 years ago. Even when we were struggling through these prejudices and these just awful times racially, there were these subcultures of men that embraced each other because that's just the way they were. It
wasn't with all organizations, and special credit has to be given to the Giants organization. Was it Stoneham at the top that, it's the buck stops here theory that I always have in my head, that it starts with the guy ultimately at top. Did Alvin Dark get a tremendously bad reputation? Because he certainly didn't seem to do and say the things that would encourage that unity, or did the unity come because of Alvin Dark?
Well, I think that the unity came because of people like Jim Davenport and Hobie Landreth and Tom Haller and Willie Mays. The core of the character of these people way surpasses their abilities as a baseball player. These guys were just men. These were men. They were loving, kind, generous people. It absolutely surpasses anything that they ever did on a baseball field. And that's just the character of the individuals on those clubs. I mean, did it have anything to do with Stoneham? Sure. I'm sure he had guys that would scout and bring guys of good character into their organization. Absolutely. Did Alvin Dark have anything to do with it? Well, he was their general. He was in charge of a lot of that. And he played in an era, he was still playing when they were coming into the league.
Yes,
but,
1951, he was the Giant shortstop when Willie was called
up.
And,
yes. So, I mean, I think that in this particular case with the Giants, it was a matter of the character of the individual players and what they were about. And it surpassed any sort of prejudice or bigotry or anything like that. These guys just loved each other, and they enjoyed each other's company, and they wanted to win, and they loved playing baseball.
Nice. It's wonderful being a Giant fan. Wonderful, at least a New York Giant fan, as I say. And and in '62, it was incredibly tough for me as I fought into when the Mets came into being. Ironically, it was the year the Giants made the World Series, and every coach, the manager, Alvin Dark, and every coach came from the stars of the New York Giant team. Jansen was the pitching coach, and Lockman was the third base coach. Yeah, he might have sent Matty Alou, and it would have been a different story. But what can I tell you? Timmy, it's wonderful talking to you again. I keep telling you week after week that what we're doing is different than what I've ever heard on radio, and you should be recognized. And I hope what this does gives you the exposure, and you put together a tape someday and rise to the top of yet another profession.
Well, I'm grateful for that. I do this because I love you, Ralph, and our listeners, and I hope that they enjoy it a fraction of as much as we do doing this. And I appreciate everything.
If they do, that would be icing on the cake. Let me just tell you that. And some do.
Okay, so we got a show coming up next week, buddy. Get your get your stuff together so that
I've got my voice in training right now. I think it's there. I think it's that classic voice they're looking for in radio, so I can be a star. It could happen. I have a whole week to work on it. Love you, Jimmy boy. We'll
be good. I love you, Ralph.
All right.
Take care.
Everybody out there, hang in there and keep on keeping on. Adios.
Bye-bye now.